One. Go ahead.
Hello everyone, how are you? Thank you so much for coming to our channel to watch this session. My name is Ashaba Farida. I'm the founder and CEO of Bambino Life Foundation, an organization that promotes girl child education and also caters for the well-being of children. So today we have our guest Abby, and she's going to briefly introduce herself. Welcome, Abby. Thank you for being with us today. Can you briefly tell us about yourself?
Certainly. Hello, Ashaba, and thank you so much for asking me to be here today. My name is Abby Newman. I'm the CEO of Mission Kids Child Advocacy Center, located in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, in the United States. We're located, if anybody knows the city of Philadelphia, very close to Philadelphia, just outside of it. My professional background is that I started as a registered nurse, and I specialized in pediatrics for many years before I went to law school. I practiced as a lawyer for a long time, and then I was asked to become involved with child advocacy. Montgomery County, where I live, is a population of about 800,000 people. And the reason to have a child advocacy center is that when a child reports being abused, whether sexually or serious physical abuse, if they're taken to and they have to talk to the police or and then a prosecutor, and then a social worker, and then a doctor, and each time they go, they have to retell their story over and over again. The child doesn't feel like they're being believed, and the child is being re-traumatized each time they have to relive these experiences. So what a child advocacy center does is that when a child reports abuse to the police or to the social workers or to the prosecutors, then those people will call us and we arrange for a time for the child and the non-offending family members to come to our child center along with all of those investigators for the child abuse. At our center, the child is interviewed one-on-one with an interviewer who's specially trained in speaking with children to ask questions that are age-appropriate and non-leading. So the child can tell their own story in their very own voice, in their own words. But those professionals watch from another room by closed-circuit television. So this way they get the benefits of a live interview with the child, and they get to see the facial expressions and the movements and the credibility without the child feeling like they're interrogated or needing to retell their story each and every time. You have to get all of the agencies in the community to agree to work this way. We started trying to get Mission Kids up and running in 2005, and it took until 2009 until we were actually ready to start seeing children. But since that time in our county, we've seen over 5,000 children. And when we're not shut down for a pandemic and COVID, we see about 600 children per year at our center. What else?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Abby. One of the reasons, actually, I would like to introduce to our viewers that are listening to us is that Mission Kids is a partner of Bambino Life Foundation. And one of the reasons why this partnership works out perfectly is because throughout our outreaches, we'll be able to hear young girls tell us that, you know, they're being molested by their relatives, they're being molested by their uncles or something like that. But we did not really have anyone in, you know, who had experience in this particular area. So a partnership came naturally between us and Mission Kids. And the reason why we're here today is we want to talk about the rising cases of child abuse, especially in this lockdown period in the quarantine season. And what we want to talk about exactly today, asking Abby, is why do you think there's so many rising cases currently in lockdown? And also because we're in lockdown, we're not able to see these children, you know, to know that maybe normally without lockdown, you're able to see a child and maybe see a bruise and maybe see some of the mannerisms of the child, maybe they're withdrawn, and you're able to tell that maybe this child is facing abuse. But in this particular case, we cannot see that, you know, they are within doors. So what can we do, and why are there so many rising cases during this quarantine period?
Yeah. Ashaba, you hit on so many really good points in that question. And one thing about the pandemic and child abuse, it's affecting children around the world. And that's because anytime there's a rise in stress, a rise in a recession, or less economic income into a home, stress rises in the home. It's in literature, but I really don't think that you need literature to tell you that if a family is economically stressed, that is going to translate into other kinds of stress. Unfortunately, that stress will sometimes translate into taking it out on the children. there's an expression here that somebody will go to work, they have a bad day at work, what do? They come home and they kick their dog. Unfortunately, sometimes people will take it out on their children in the same way, whether it is physical abuse or sometimes sexual abuse, if that's already going on in the household anyway. When a child goes to school, when we're out and about outside of our homes, all right, on a normal day, children go to school. Adults will go to work. They will go shopping in the community. They'll go about their business. They'll interact with many people in a day, every single hour. And what that means is that there are extra eyes on our children. There are extra eyes on us and how we interact, both good and bad. Suddenly, all of those extra eyes are gone. So you have increased stress in a household combined with no other people outside of the household being able to say, like you said, Ashaba, for physical abuse, they can't see a bruise on a face. They can't see if a child has bruises all over their body. With sexual abuse, a child is so much more limited in who they can tell and who they can speak to. So across the United States, calls to our child abuse hotline are down by 50%. You were telling me earlier that calls to the police in Uganda to report child abuse are increased. Is that what you said? That they're up actually?
Yeah, not really. I mean, some of the cases are not reported, but some of the cases that are reported, it may take time for the police to actually reach the particular area, but also not even to cut you off from what you're saying is that we also have a problem whereby even if a child is going to report or if someone reports, they are not going to necessarily come all the way wherever they're coming from just for a single child. They only come out for extreme cases, and most of those cases a child has already lost their life, or maybe, you know, they've broken a leg or something. Extreme cases, which is very, very sad.
Yeah, well, that's really hard. That's really tough. And so I think it's important in these times when we do see our neighbors, all right, if we're close enough, if we live near enough to our neighbors, that we hear them, that we keep an extra eye out when we can on our children, that we report abuse, we report it if we think that something is happening and a child is in danger. It may be that even just by reporting that you're stopping somebody, you're making them rethink what they're doing if they might be concerned that somebody might actually call the police or say, you can't do that. I think that it's up to all of us where we can, especially now where everybody is locked in and not going about their normal movements, to intervene where we can and to contact others. Contact other family members if you know them, of the people who you think might be abusing a child.
Okay, thank you for that. And one of the things that I've also figured out, or what I've noticed actually in this particular period, and what I've been seeing in the news, is that you find children scared to report, because if, say, it's really extreme and a child is going to maybe call the police or report on their particular, maybe a family member or a parent or something like that, they're scared that they're going to be kicked out of the house and they will not have anything to eat or anything to drink, and no one will be able to come, you know, to their rescue. So you find children enduring this physical form of abuse because they do not have any other option. And it's actually really sad, because even the system here, I don't want to lie about it, is that even if a child is being mistreated and, you know, you bring in police, after police, the child does not really have where to stay. And no one is going to look after your child. If maybe the mother is in prison, you know, everyone is going to now blame the child. Who is the victim? But they're going to be like, oh, you brought it upon yourself. You reported, you did this and this. So you find it so hard because children cannot report these cases, and even adults or neighbors are scared to do this, because if I call the police on my neighbor, then I'm the bad person, you know. So how do we overcome that block whereby you look beyond, you know, my neighbor hating me, you look beyond this person hating me and doing the right thing?
That's a lot, and it's hard. It can be done though, and it has to start with everybody. There has to come to a point where people will say, this is not okay, and we're not going to accept this anymore. People have to start speaking out if they see a child being hurt, if they see a neighbor being hurt, and saying, that's not okay. And if somebody yells back at you, how can you do this? You mind your own business. This has nothing to do with you. People have to have the courage, and it's hard, but people, more than one person, has to have the courage to stand up and say, no, it's not okay. And it is my business, because that is a defenseless child that you are hurting. That child cannot stop. That can't stand up to you. And if a child needs a place to go because they've reported abuse or somebody has reported abuse and they can't stay in the house any longer because it's too dangerous or too hard for them, relatives, close friends, and neighbors have to stand up and help that child. Take that child out of that situation. You can't kidnap a child, obviously, but if a mother is on board with it, if her boyfriend is the abuser, yes, take my child and keep him or her safe. People have to be willing to stand up and do that. There has to be discussion in the community, at the community level, between neighbors, between community members, and with the police department, to tell the police, we don't want this. We want you to help us. That's your job, and that's why you're here. And hopefully there are members in that police force who will agree and who will help community members to stand up for these children. And the same for social workers to say, this is not okay. I'm going to find a way to help that child with whatever the resources are in the communities. And then at the community level, to get your prosecutor involved for your district or your area and talk to their office and say, we're not okay with this. We need you to help us stop this. You are law enforcement too. What can you do to help us? What can we do to help you help us? And that's the way that partnerships are formed, because it has to come from a community level. All aspects of a community have got to band together and say, this is not okay with us. Treating our children this way is not okay with us, and we're going to stop it. It's long, it's hard, but you can do it.
Yes. I mean, right now, I would like, let us just step away from the host guest questions and let's now really talk and discuss, because there is something that has been bothering me for such a period of time. And I've seen this, and recently I actually saw on Daily Mail, I know maybe they have some blow things out of proportion sometimes, but I saw, I think it was 2 stories, and whereby it was a young boy around, I think, 3 years, who was autistic, and he was killed by the boyfriend of the mother, which was really sad. And then I saw another story where the young girl was raped by the boyfriend of the mother, and the mother knew about this. And I could not fathom how a parent can let such a thing happen in, you know, in the presence. Maybe you're there, this is your child, you're supposed to protect them, this is your role as a parent, to protect a child, and yet you're there and you're seeing your boyfriend doing this. And I've been asking myself for such a long time, I know it is hard, I don't have children myself, but I know it is hard as a woman who has children to date. It's already hard, we get it, we know no one wants you. Maybe sometimes even the men who come, you don't know if they find out you have kids, they're going to go away and all that stuff. But when do you introduce this much to your children? Do you introduce them just 1 day, 2 weeks? Because I've seen women who introduce men after 1 month, you know, and these men just come and go. You know, you introduce your child to like 10 men before even when they are started, or before they are even ends, and you don't have a problem with that. But you don't know the consequences, because these very men are the men who are abusing your own children in your own house. And these kids are very scared, because sometimes they don't even know what's wrong or right. And they're scared that if they report to the mother is not going to believe it. Can you believe some women think that, you know, their daughters are competing with them? You know, your daughter tells you this and you're like, no, you just don't want this to work out. So when do you think it is the right time for, I know this is, you're not a dating, you're not a dating counselor or something, but I really feel that this is something that should be talked about, because so many children have lost their lives in this way. So when do you think someone or a partner, when should you introduce a partner or boyfriend or girlfriend to your children? What are the steps you should take to know that this person is not going to abuse my children? As a parent, what are some of those steps?
So that's a lot too. And it's hard. I'm going to start with a couple of things, and I'm going to ask all mothers who might be single and dating to take a step back when they think about it. Yeah. You are the very most important person in your child's life, period. That's it. It's you. And as a mother, in my opinion, you owe them the responsibility. It is your highest responsibility and priority to keep your child safe. Now, you're human. You need social interactions. It's okay to have men in your lives and boyfriends and a social life. That's okay, as long as your child comes first. So when then do you introduce a man in your life to your child? It's a lot of different factors in there. But it reminds me of something that I learned when I was a pediatric nurse. And the phrase is, children learn what they live. So think about what it is that your child is learning by how you live. And your children see everything. Don't think your children don't know what's going on, because they know anyway. They see it. They might be quietly watching. They know when they're allowed to ask and when they're not allowed to ask. So you have got to take a step back and remember that phrase. Children learn what they live. What is it that your child is living through you? If you have a lot of different men that you decide to date and go out with, there's no judgment here. You have to know yourself. If that happens often, then my thought is, you need to not introduce every one of those men to your children, because you just don't know those men well enough. You just can't know somebody that well in a short amount of time. And since it's your child, you should always err on the side of caution. If you're not sure about whether or not to introduce somebody, if you don't know them that well, don't introduce them. And that should be a pretty good benchmark for your person that you're dating anyway. If they give you pushback about not meeting your child and not understanding that that child is your first priority, I'm going to suggest that maybe you should question whether this man should be in your life or should stay in your life, and certainly whether you should introduce that man into your child's life. It's also dependent upon age. Young children may form attachments easier than older children do. Do you really want your young children to become attached to a lot of different men that are coming in and out of your life? And even if you think you're in love after a month, we know a month just isn't that long of a time. Do you want your child getting attached and then you're in that relationship for 6 months or a year and then that man leaves again? So again, children learn what they live. What is your child living through you, and what are they learning? And in terms of why women sometimes don't see that, I'm going to suggest as well, I'm not a psychologist. I do not treat people with that disclaimer. But you need to ask yourself, what is it in your head and in your background? What we do know about with abuse is that it can be generational. And somebody that's been abused, that's never worked through that, is more likely to have a child who becomes abused, because somehow you think that that's normal because it's what you lived. And you need to take a step back and say, did that happen to me? How do I prevent that from happening to my child, as opposed to having my child relive that? Yeah, I was just talking a lot. Does it make sense what I said? Is it?
No, it does. It does. And I actually, when you say that this is not your area or you're not a psychiatrist or something, I think you're actually wrong, because at the end of the day, these children come to you. It's these children that are handled this way that bring these cases, because they become the product of abuse in the end of it all. And I think what people always don't look at when we say abuse, children abuse or child abuse, they always think about physical. They think about you're going to see bruises or maybe sexual, but it's also emotional and mental. There is also that, and people don't look at that. So you have even this kind of case scenario where you find parents are always, quarreling, they're always fighting, they hate each other, they say they're staying together for their children, which they think they're doing their children a favor, which is actually not, because they're bringing this toxicity around the children. And the next thing you know is that children enter these relationships when they grow up, and they think it is okay, to beat a woman up. They think it is okay to talk to a woman this way, or a girl, she thinks it's okay to be abused. She thinks it's okay for her husband to talk to her like that. We actually have cases here whereby you find parents, or the older ladies, telling you that if a man does not beat you, then he doesn't love you, which is actually very wrong. But it's because of what they saw as kids. They saw their parents being beaten, but then they saw their parents stay in marriages, however unhappy they were. So I feel like it goes beyond just physical and sexual. There is also the mental part of it, whereby you're breeding this kind of energy around the child that you don't know. You think you're doing it for them, but you're actually not doing it for them. And it messes up their lives when they grow up, because they learn to take in things that they shouldn't have taken in if they'd grown up in a stable home. I mean, I think it's better. I think I had somewhere, or Dr. Phil said something, that it's better to be separated but in a happy home than being together and in a toxic environment. Yeah, so I think actually, yeah, you can expand on that, because I've seen this happen so many times. Parents are so unhappy, but then they stay together and they say it's because of the children, but they don't know, their impact and how it's going to affect the lives of the children in the future.
Yeah. Children learn what they live. So if that's what they're living, that's what they're learning. And it's so much harder to break it later on as an adult, as opposed to just living it right the first time. And it doesn't have to be dependent upon money. It's dependent, like you say, about, does the child feel safe? Does the child feel secure? And somebody who needs to be beaten to show love, I'm not hearing safety or security in the same sentence with the word beating. And again, I'm not a psychologist, but just as a person, I don't hear those words going together.
True.
And women, we have to stand up. There is so much inequity in all societies still. We have to support each other. Women are famous for not supporting each other. Women must support each other. We have to believe each other, and we have to believe our children. If a child comes to you and says, I am being sexually touched, and they're not going to use those words, but whatever words they are, so that what you're hearing from that child is that somebody is doing something sexual to them. Children generally, by and large, almost never lie about those things. They don't have words for those things. They don't know how to express those things, and they don't make it up in their minds. That's not something that somebody, if a child is doing imaginative play, they're not going to have imaginative play about being sexually touched unless something has happened to them. So if a child comes and talks about that, you have to listen to them. Either something has happened to them, or they've been exposed to pornography, which they shouldn't be, or they've seen something that they shouldn't have seen. And I think that it's not uncommon that adults don't want to believe children when they say that. Because if you're not a child abuser, it's such a terrible thing to hear. It's such an awful, ugly thing to hear that it's easier for us as an adult to say, the child made that up. They're not telling the truth. Especially if they're talking about a boyfriend or a family member. We know in the United States that sexual...
Or a husband, because the thing is that a woman is going to think in that, but you'd rather ignore it so that you stay with the love of your life rather than acknowledge what the child is saying. So you think if you acknowledge it, then this marriage that you've built up is going to crumble, or the person you love is going to leave you. But I feel like your child should always come first in this particular situation. Yeah.
I think in every situation, your child has to come first. That is just my opinion. Your child must always come first. Just remember, you are the person for your child. You, the mother, as a mother, they should always just come first. And I know that that's hard sometimes, because again, mothers are people too. I do have children. I have 3 adult women who are my daughters. And it's hard sometimes. We're people too. We have our own wants and needs. And sometimes they conflict with what's best for our children. But when we have children, when we take that on, it's our job then. That's the role that we've taken on as their mother, to protect them. By and large, more than anything else, to protect them and to love them. So those are just my feelings. That's not in my role as Mission Kids CEO either, but just
So, Abby, I wanted to ask something. Since the topic at hand has been during lockdown, and we are not forgetting this, so I'm thinking about a particular situation where maybe a child is being abused, but they are unable to report to the police, or they do not have the means to report to the police. How best can they protect themselves in this particular, situation? Or if maybe there is a mother or anyone who is there out there, how best can they protect this particular child in this period, as they wait for authorities, or before the authorities even listen to them? What are the precautions they can take for their protection?
That's so hard. It has to go back to what I was saying at the beginning. Everybody has to act as a community and say, this is not okay. And while we're waiting for the police, I'm going to help you. Can you think about a safe place? Can you think about a safe person for you to contact? I know it's very hard while everybody is in lockdown. That makes it much harder. And the problem is that it makes it easier for the abuser, because they know that everybody is in lockdown, and they know that it's hard for you to leave the house or to take your children someplace. And they know that it's hard for the child to go someplace. But try to think as best you can. Can you think about a person that can help you? A person that can help your child? A place that maybe you can send your child to that's safe to wait until the authorities can get there? And I think that that's it. It's got to be a community response, and community members helping community members. If you were to go out with your child to try to take them someplace safe, and the police were to stop you, and you explained it to the police, would it be believed, or is that a problem as well?
You asking?
Yeah.
Honestly, I've seen some of the cases here, and especially in regards to child abuse or even sexual abuse, and how the police has handled them. And honestly, it's not fair, and also it's not a conducive environment, because I've had situations whereby even if a child is raped, they have to keep going and they have to go through these tests. It's traumatizing, and in the end, even the child just decides, this is not worth it. I'm saying maybe teenagers or something, they say this is not worth it, and they just, because the humiliation they have to go through, showing up to the police station, repeating their stories to over like 10 people, it becomes traumatizing. So most of the cases do not even make it to the police. And I know that there's some organizations that are handling child abuse cases. And like we have, I know there is one that handles child brides. Like if someone is going to marry off a child, you can call them and then they can help and everything like that. But generally, in terms of police or maybe centers that have been put there, we do not have many. And also being believed, the story to be believable is not that much. And it's really sad, because normally people tend to believe when it's already too late, when the case is already too extreme, because when the case breaks the news, then it's really extreme. When you find a child, maybe the leg has been broken off. Recently, I saw yesterday on the news, this lady had children, and this was the boyfriend, and he just killed all the children, and he also killed himself, getting back to the lady, because maybe he thought the lady was cheating. So it's really not a good situation. It's more like, and the reason why I really wanted us to talk about this today is because I want everyone to take it as their responsibility as a community to be able to come in, not just leave it to that family that is going through that. So that is what I've been looking at. And I wanted us to talk more of how can us as a community come together? How can us as a community be able to help with this particular situation?
That's exactly it. The community has to come together. It's going to be really hard to do it as a group during the pandemic, because you can't gather in groups, you can't get together, you can't have group meetings. But however you can talk to each other, whether you're out and you stay the 2 meters apart for social distancing when you're allowed out together to talk in that way. If you have computers that you can talk to each other through, or cell phones, and talk to each other and text, you can keep up that way. The thing about living in this day and age is that we're isolated, but we're not as isolated as past generations have been. Ashaba, you and I are in different parts of the world. We're so many hours apart in time, but we're talking to each other and we see each other. There are ways that a community can do this as well.
Yeah.
Identify community members who are willing to step up and take a leadership role to help organize people together. Identify people in the community already in leadership positions. Is there someone in the police department that will help you and take the side of the community and the children on this and will be willing to stand up to others in the police department? Is there a prosecutor who will help as well and say, this is not right and this is not what the people want? All right. Are there professionals who will stand up? The phrase, it takes a village. That's exactly it. It takes
a village.
I can tell you our story at Mission Kids. We're not the only child advocacy center in the United States, but we came about a little bit late. Child advocacy centers started in the 1980s in the United States. And I told you before, Mission Kids didn't open and start seeing children until 2009. But the reason that the prosecutor in our community first started trying to start a child advocacy center was because of a terrible, awful case of 2 children who were being repeatedly raped and molested by their uncles. And their uncles were one of the uncles was a very high profile person. And that suddenly caught a lot of media attention. And there were people that were demonstrating at the courthouse while he was on trial. How dare you arrest him? He was a clergyman. He was a religious figure, very well known in New York, that was coming down to us about 2 hours away and horribly, horribly sexually abusing his niece and nephew. And it was after that case, and it's like you just said, the boy, it happened to him when he was a young child. The abuser was finally coming to trial when the boy was age 17. And they were trying to make a plea deal. And the prosecutor said, do you want me to take this deal? And he just said, will this go away? Can I finally be done with this? If so, then just take the plea and make this go away. This system is horrible. And so that's when that prosecutor, when she started leading the movement in our county to start getting police on board and community members on board with the idea of starting a child advocacy center. So that's what I was saying at the beginning. It takes a while, but the community has got to take the first step. You've got to identify somebody. People have to step forward. Okay, I'm not taking this anymore. We're not taking this anymore. This is not allowed in our community. It's not allowed. And I don't know any other way to say it. It's got to be a great effort.
Yes, true. I mean, we all have to do our...
My sitting in the United States isn't going to do anything. All right? I want to, but it doesn't help. The community has to do it. I'm sorry, go ahead. I cut you off.
No, I was saying you're very right, because I feel like each and every one of us has a role to play, and each and every one of us has to come forward, and because the children are our future. And if we think back when we were young, if something horrible happened to us and no one would listen to us, where would we be now? Where would we be? So we have to think about that and put that into consideration and realize that us as ourselves, we have to come forward. We have to be the good neighbor and see if your child next door is being, molested or being abused. You have to be the good teacher and see if a child is being bullied. You have to be a good, because you have to think about your own child. If it were your own child going through this, would you want someone to help them? Would you want someone to come forward and be able to rescue them? So you do the same thing and you pay it forward and be the good citizen that you're supposed to be, or a good humanitarian, and be able to reach out. And then also another thing that I wanted to tackle today is that in the African culture, I don't know whether you know about this, we have this thing whereby they say, if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. I myself, I grew up being beaten. If I did something that I was not supposed to do, my mother would occasionally, spank me, with a stick or something like that. And it's still going around. We have so many parents doing that to their children, where they get to spank them so that the child, like I said, the proverb says, if you spare the rod and spoil the child. So I want to know, when do you think is too far? Because this is something that is not going to go away. It's not going to be eliminated. Parents are not going to stop beating their children. It's going to be there. But when is too far? When do you think they have taken it too far? And when has it gone beyond just a simple discipline to now real abuse? When do they cross that line?
Children learn what they live. Are you going to teach your child to be a violent adult human being? Because if you are being violent to them, then that's what they're living. And if children learn what they live, and you are, as a parent or in the household, they are continuously being beaten and hurt and injured, they are learning and living violence. And again, I'm not a psychologist, but it seems to me that that's how they're going to grow up thinking is normal. And if they grow up thinking that's normal, that's how they're going to behave as adults to each other and to their own children. So in terms of discipline, I think anything that leaves a mark is too far. That is my own personal opinion. If sometimes a child gets out of control, a young child, and you want to swat their bottom with your hand, just a swat, I want to show this. That's it. Not a beating, never a closed fist, never with anything in your hand, no object. And for older children, I'm not sure that there's ever any reason to be physically violent with them. I don't believe that that's going to make a difference on an older child. Older children are able to reason. They're able to understand. Oh, you took that sweet out of the kitchen, and it wasn't for you. We were saving that. You were hungry. Now you took that food out of the rest of our mouths. How do you feel about that? Don't you feel terrible? I'm hungry now, and I'm your mother, and I'm not going to eat. I would think that type of reasoning is going to be much more impactful because they can understand. Again, the short answer to your question is never a closed fist, never anything, no object in you, and nothing that ever leaves a mark. Just my opinion.
Yeah, I know we're going to have some African parents looking, and because of course we have different cultures in the Western world and then the African world, but I would definitely recommend that I feel like anything that is going to leave a bruise on a child, or anything that is going to bring out blood or that is going to break skin, I feel like that is too much. And I feel like with that, you've actually crossed over to now that is mistreatment. So I feel like before
your child, if you're breaking their skin, if you're drawing blood, if you're leaving large bruises, what lesson are you teaching your child? I don't think the lesson is actually whatever it was that they did that was wrong. And that's not to say that they're not wrong, because they probably were, and they're probably making you crazy. But that's not okay. It's not okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It is not ever okay.
No, I know. No, it's fine. Don't be sorry. No, it's fine. You're really right, because I think it's not okay. Anything that brings, any kind of trauma to this child, and the child to be actually scared, when they see you, they're actually scared of you. I think it is not right. So I think you're right. So when it comes to crossing that line, anything that you're going to do, I feel like you should first evaluate how you're feeling. If you're really, really angry, then I feel like you should not punish your child in that particular state, because you can do something that you regret later. So I think it's always better to come back when you're calm, and then you've settled down, and then you can be able to, maybe if you want to slap a child or something, be able to talk about it, whatever way. No one is going to tell you how to raise your child. That is your child, but do not cross that line where your own child is scared of you, and where you know that it's going to be a cycle, because this child is going to grow up and think that violence is okay, and it's going to transcend into their normal life, where you find you've raised a boy who's beating up, women, or you've raised a girl. I've had girls who beat up men. You've raised a girl who's beating up a man, who's thinking it's okay because at a young age she was shown that it's okay. And then also I would like to I want to point out, and I want to actually ask, what are some of the signs that a child is being traumatized or is being abused?
So there are different signs for physical or sexual abuse. The physical abuse that we were just...
Hello?
Can you hear me? The children that we were just talking about with physical abuse,
Yes.
any bruises in unexpected places, cuts, there are certain kinds of fractures, they're called spiral fractures, burn patterns, burns that look like cigarettes that might have been burned into a child's skin, a child saying that somehow they burned a part of their body, or that looked like they might have been come in contact with hot water. Bruises where you wouldn't expect them. Little babies that are bruised should not be bruised, and the excuses that come up with it. So those are the signs of physical abuse. Sexual abuse. Sexual abuse, the good news and the bad news for children is that it heals very quickly. So if a girl in particular has been raped, there will be signs of it, bruising, bleeding, difficulty walking in the first few days or a week, but then luckily she will heal quickly. But the outside heals, the inside does not heal. And so what will happen is that a child that might be outgoing and friendly and happy suddenly becomes withdrawn and sad. A child that was a very good student may suddenly not become a good student and just start failing in school. Their personality changes. They may go back to wetting the bed at night if that's not something that they've ever done. And sometimes there's nothing you can see, but the child is still hurting internally. And so it's so important that you listen. If a child says to you, he did this, he touched this, that you believe them. Because if you shut them down, they may never tell it to anybody again. And those internal scars, they don't go away. Listen to our children. Listen to your children. That's the most important thing I can say. Listen to them and believe them.
And also, I think I've noticed this, that sometimes, of course, the people who do the abusing, especially the sexual abuse, are really, really smart. And sometimes, they cover their traces. So you find they tell the child, do not tell this to mommy, or do not tell this to anyone. This is our little secret. So a child will always, children are actually very, very intelligent, and I think people do not see this. So when a child comes to tell you something, the kind of atmosphere you give them, or even before they say anything, will bring them to open themselves up, or actually to close themselves off. So I feel like as a parent, you do not even have to wait for your child to tell you this. So if you're maybe bathing your child and you see something, maybe like a bruise, or the child is saying, mommy, this part is hurting me, or this, try to investigate, but not in an accusing kind of form of, oh, what happened here, why did you do this, or why did you do this? More like, oh, you can use a doll and maybe show where is hurting you, where did they touch you, something as loving, so the child is able to open up genuinely. Because I've read so many times that these people who do this kind of things, they tell children, do not report, this is our little secret, or they bribe the children with maybe sweets. So maybe even looking out for such things whereby you see your child always has sweets, chocolates, this and this, but you didn't give them money, or they have like dolls, new things, but you did not pay for those things, and they're coming from a certain uncle, she's always saying, oh, uncle is giving me this, uncle is giving me this. I feel like as a responsible parent, you should call this baby on the side and try to find out what actually is really happening beyond just the free things.
So yeah, you're entirely correct. The thing about child molesters and abusers is that they are often very manipulative people. Again, the way that our center was started, well, no, not the way our center is started, but one of the reasons that sexual abuse has been brought to the forefront of discussions was a case in Pennsylvania called, I don't know if you heard of it, called the Jerry Sandusky case. And he was a coach at a very well-known university in Pennsylvania that was abusing many, many boys. And he did it within the community. He was on the football team. He was on television nationally. Millions of people knew who he was. And he was actually part of a charity that worked with young boys, so that he had access to these young boys that he could molest, and still be in the community, and he could be alone with them and say, well, I'm just trying to help them, when in fact he was molesting them. Child abusers are manipulative. And just the way that you're saying they can be manipulative in a much more subtle way, like don't tell, and this is our secret, and suddenly a child has money that didn't have money, an adolescent has money, or a cell phone that they never had before. Yeah, follow your gut is the best thing I can say. You know your children. You know if something is wrong. And if you think that somebody might be a problem, even though it's somebody that's well known in the community or a family member, keep your child away from them. That's it. Simple as that. Because if you approach that person, they're going to come up with a story, and they're not going to be violent to you. They'll say, "Oh, no, you misunderstood. It was just this. It wasn't. I would never hurt your child. Oh, how could you say such a thing about me?" Nobody's going to admit it. They're not going to admit it. So follow your gut. Just keep your child away if you can. And if that person right now is in that household with you, do the very best that you can to separate them. Do what you can to put a safety plan in place in the house. And if you can, while everybody is locked down, try to get that child to go live with a relative, with a close friend, with a place where you think that they'll be safe. Because that is what happens.
Yes. And I also believe as a parent, you should also start to question, these friendships that your child is making, because the child is very innocent and they're young and they befriend anyone. But I feel like as a parent, you have to come in, and because I know, actually, I'm very, very certain about this, that most African parents do not sit their young girls down and say, do not allow, if someone calls you to their car, don't go, do not talk to strangers, do not do this and this and this. They don't give them this talk. And then you find children befriending. And actually, before even I go to strangers, I've noticed that most of the child abuse cases happen with people we know already in the family. So it's like relatives, it's an uncle, it's an auntie. And also I feel like I should add this, because I think people feel like abuse or sexual abuse is only targeted to young girls, which is not the truth. Also, boys are sexually harassed. You find a boy maybe 18 years or 17 years or whatever age, you find, maybe like a housemaid at home, you find an auntie, anyone is forcing themselves onto this boy, and they're telling them, this is helping you become a man, this is okay, do not report. If you report, you're going to look like a sissy, you're going to become a girl. So I feel like we should, as parents, or parents should be able to see these kind of things and be able to think far. If your child is bringing new toys at home, if your child is bringing new things, you didn't give them the money, you should question them. Where did this dress come from? And if it's always this one uncle, it's always coming from this one person, question them. You do not have to go and confront the person. You have to be smart about this, because it not only goes, the uncle may say, no, I did not do that, or may, like you said, may deny, but then they'll become even more forceful towards your child. They're going to punish your child for telling on them. So how do you protect your child in this entire thing, while reporting the culprit, but at the same time protecting your own child, and also letting your child know that, they are worthy, because most of the children have been abused. They feel like the control has been taken away from them, and they feel like they are not worthy anything. And most of the times they blame themselves. They think they brought it on. If I didn't dress like this, if I didn't sleep like this, if I didn't do this, maybe uncle wouldn't have done this. So, and also don't even forget that we have the victim blaming, which is an entire culture whereby everyone is going to blame the girl. Like, why did you dress like this? You shouldn't have worn something short. They're never going to put that child first. So you find the child's confidence goes away. They no longer believe in themselves. Some of them even think about, killing themselves, suicidal thoughts and everything. Others completely withdraw from their families or from their communities, or even from school, because they don't see any reason to live or to go on. So if a child is being molested or has been molested, what is the advice, or what are some of the steps that a parent should take in helping to restore their confidence back up, and letting them know that they're hard, and I hear you, I care about you, and I love you, and it is not your fault? How should they go about that?
Exactly what you just said. I mean, you need to be there for your child. It is such a hard thing for them to do. If the child abuser is somebody in your family, which in the US it is 50% of the time, and over 90% of the time in the US, and I believe in Uganda as well, the child and the family knows the abuser. They're not strangers, by and large. They're people you know, and they manipulate. And especially if it's a family member, or if it's a community member like the coach that I was telling you about in Pennsylvania. they're going to say to the child, who's going to believe you? Nobody's going to believe you against me. And if it's a family member, they're going to say, oh, I'm your mother's father. I'm your grandfather. Yes. If you tell about me, you're going to hurt her. How badly is she going to feel? And she's going to blame you, and she's going to hate you, and she's going to think you're ugly, and she's going to think you're ugly inside. That's exactly what you just said. You just have to reassure them as much as possible. You didn't do this. He did it. You didn't ask for it. He did it. And just keep loving them and be there for them. If there are any counselors for them to talk to who can help to reinforce that, and just continuously make them feel good about themselves. I love you. I care about you. This wasn't your fault. I don't think you're ugly. You're still beautiful. You've always been beautiful. It's not your fault. It's very, very hard. But you just have to keep there. You just have to be there.
That is true. And anyone who's listening or is still listening in, as an organization, me and Abby have been talking for the past year about starting up something together, because I saw what we're doing and I really, really loved it. And I feel like we would be able to do so much more here together, especially in Uganda. And we have been talking about a partnership for such a long time. And one of the things that we have been looking at, actually, when I think about it, is that it gives me hope, because we wanted to have a center whereby if a child has been molested, if a child has been traumatized, they can be able to get their confidence back up. They can be able to take control back to themselves. And we have been looking at so many ways on how we can do it, have a center whereby if you brought your child, or if you brought your cousin or sister, whoever, or who had gone through molestation or abuse, we're able to offer them that, safe haven where they're able to feel comfortable and be able to share their story, but above that, be able to feel like they've taken that control back. I can't emphasize the control thing, and anyone who's listening to me, I want you to know this, that when a child is raped or when a child goes through sexual abuse, they'll never ever feel like they're in control of their body again. Some of them will scrub themselves, they'll clean themselves, because they'll hate their body so much that they'll feel like their body betrayed them. They'll feel like they're dirty. So they want to gain back that control back to themselves and feel like, okay, you know what? I'm in charge of my body. And we wanted to do something, and we are still working on it. It's not something that is going to happen overnight, but this gives me so much hope, because I feel like we can do it. I feel like we can be able to help and, be able to hear these children who want to tell their stories and listen to them, not from a point of authority where we are, interrogating them, not from a point of victim blaming, not from a point of family where we are saying you're breaking down the family, just a neutral listening ear that is going to hear what they have to say and be able to comfort them in this particular period. So you pray for us. We are still doing this. It will happen. Abby, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, it will happen, first of all. And if somebody is telling you, if a child or an adolescent girl is telling you that something happened to them, they're trusting you. So if they are trusting you with that secret, by your being there, you asked me before what to do. Your being there and listening to them and believing them is such a big first step for that girl or boy to heal. We see that all the time at Mission Kids, that a child will come in with their parent, and it doesn't matter the age, and they're just kind of hunched over and they're not talking, they're quiet, and then they go and they do the interview and they tell that story and they share that secret with the interviewer. And we see them then, and the interviewer is not judgmental, they just listen. That's all that they do, is listen. And they know that there are other people listening to the interview. But then when they leave and they go back out to that parent, you can see that they've suddenly straightened up and that they feel better about themselves because they've gotten rid of that secret. Think about it. This is something that we all know. If you're holding on to this terrible secret, it eats you up inside. This is the worst secret imaginable that a child or an adolescent can be holding. So if they are trusting you with that, don't betray their trust. Listen to them. Just listen. Don't judge. You just listen and just say, I'm here for you. It's okay. Yes. I'm here for you. You're okay. It's not you. Biggest thing you could do, and that will help. So yes, I want to start this center with you too, Ashaba, in Uganda. to have this place where they can come and be supported by the center in the community without going anyplace else. And I think that that's also a good way to help start community support, to give the community something to do and a place to rally around victims and to help the victims.
Thank you so much, Abby. I think our time is up, and thank you so much for being here. I'll also ask you to have a few closing remarks, but at the same time, I just wanted to let everyone know that we shall be having more sessions, because this is a broad topic and you cannot cover it in one day. And what we want to bring to you is that we want you, as a person seated in your home watching this video, what can you do? You always have to look at the government, you always have to look at the police. What can you do, and when do you come in? Even just listening to a story is so much more, because you're listening to someone, you're letting them know that it's okay, it's not your fault. That is the first step, like Abby said. So Abby, will you give us some closing remarks? And then I can also maybe give one or two, and then we close.
Okay. Just closing remarks are, first of all, thank you so much, Ashaba, for having me and speaking to me. Closing remarks are, it takes a village, and children learn what they live. So think about what it is that you're doing, that your children are living and learning, and have that guide you. It takes a village. Watch out for your neighbors. Watch out for other children in your village. Everybody needs to help everybody. And if a child comes to you, no matter what their age, and says something, that somebody did something to them, and it's sexual in nature, believe them. Just believe them, and then worry about what to do. Just listen and believe, and you will immediately start making a difference in somebody's life. That's it. And I hope we could do this again, Ashaba. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abby. Thank you so much, everyone who's listening in. And yeah, we are closing with, it takes a village to raise a child. So we all have our own personal, roles in this. We have to come together, and we have to know when to step in and when to report. But above all, when you see a child, imagine if it were your child going through that. Would you want you as an adult to just ignore it, or would you want to step in, or would you want someone to be able to listen to that child? Think about that whenever you're making these decisions. If it were your child, what would you do, and be able to do that? And also, one of the things that I want to talk about, my greatest actually worry, or what has been eating me up, is parents who are dating when you have children. When do you introduce this man to your child? Do not be quick to introduce a man to your child. I know everyone wants a happy marriage, you want a happy family, but think about your children first, because these very men that you're introducing your child to are the very men that are raping your children. And when your children report to you, do not believe them. Always believe your child first. If it turns out the child was maybe reporting for attention, you'll find out that later. But in the beginning, that is not important. Always believe your child first and let the others follow. Thank you so much, Abby, for being here with us. We are sorry the live wouldn't go through, but we are happy to have you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Michelle?